ironically, the hearing I have to go to is on China, so that seems to be a constant refrain. Mr. Simmons, in the department, are there specific programs, offices, personnel assigned to deal with this problem in terms of recycling and mining and those kinds of things? In other words, you expressed a general support, which I appreciate, but is there somebody who wakes up every morning thinking this is something we've got to deal with?
Yes, first of all, there are multiple people that are in the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy that work on critical minerals. It's not a very big team, but we do have multiple people. You also have the Critical Materials Institute, and much of that focus, well, really that focus for funding of $25 million a year is exactly on this issue. The Office of Science, I just found this out recently. They're going to have a new initiative on critical minerals starting in FY20. They have been doing research for a long time, but a renewed focus on some of the basic science of, as Mr. Mills mentioned, to advance what is possible. So
I would urge you to think about how to structure that so that it really does have a serious focus. One of my principles is structure is policy, and if you have a messy, confused structure, you're going to have a messy, confused policy. So I commend the work that's being done, but let's see if we can focus it more precisely.
We are working on that exact issue because this issue is difficult, it is complex, it is far-reaching, and we need to figure out a nice, cohesive strategy that makes sense. So we're working on that.
Thank you very much. Ms. Carlson, have we already lost? Have we already lost this fight? Have the Chinese already cornered the market? I mean, I think you said 50% of cobalt in Africa and some other areas. What do we do? And none of you have testified specifically about which of these. Are there cobalt deposits here? There's been some allusion to how hard it is to mine here, but let's assume that mining had a better reputation. Are the minerals here? Do they exist here, these various minerals?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. No, I would not say that we've lost the race, and I do think there are a number of avenues for additional sustainable production of resources, but as well as the supply chain recycling and investment in materials R&D that I believe each one of the panelists mentioned. I think one of the tricky aspects of cobalt in particular is that it's a byproduct of copper and nickel mining. And so it's subject
to plenty of copper mining, or there used to be anyway, in the U.S. So does that mean we've got cobalt?
And so
in Jerome, Arizona? And
so it depends on whether or not it's economically extractable. And so given the fact that it's a byproduct, there are fluctuations in the market, and cobalt is subject to those fluctuations. And as a consequence as well, cobalt, more so lithium, isn't as traded as widely on global commodity markets. And in the case of lithium, is a specialty chemical and ends up being contracted more directly. There are opportunities and resources in this country, but largely speaking, they tend to be highly, highly concentrated in countries around the world. And I think given that concentration, it's important to evaluate partnerships and investments.
Well, one of the problems, it seems to me, not to interrupt, but one of the problems, I guess I did interrupt, is that China is China Inc. We talk about mining companies and whether they can get investments and whether it pays back and what the rate of return is. China has decided, apparently, as a matter of national governmental policy, that this is important. And so the normal rules of the road of capitalism aren't necessarily applying here if it's a government-owned entity. And that's something we really need to think about. If we're assuming the private sector is going to open a mine in the Congo that may or may not be sustainable economically, China doesn't necessarily care about that. I think that's a problem we need to identify. One more question before my time runs out. Mr. Kang, what percentage of the need could be met by recycling if we had a much stronger and more thoroughgoing recycling program? We got an awful lot of batteries in this country.
Absolutely. When you look at the projections of production of batteries in the future, they are outrageously enormous. And so then when you take it to the collection rates now and recycling, I've heard estimates that anywhere from about 20 to 30% of the world's mineral needs can be met by recycling.
Well, that's not insignificant. I mean,
That's not insignificant,
that's
absolutely.
a big number.
And actually, it's reclaiming value from our waste stream.
Right.
One way to think about this is if you could change your perspective, I believe, one of the next new mines of the future are our urban cities, our homes. We have this material locked away in our drawers and in boxes that we don't look at too often. So if we can promote collection, if we can take these kind of spent batteries away from or bring them back to this industry, I think we can claim a significant amount of minerals.
One way to incent, I mean, the classic way we incent things is by a bounty or by a payment of some kind. If it's worth a few bucks, that would maybe be enough to stimulate somebody to bring them in.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Senator. One other thing I'll add, I think that we should be very mindful of is it's not only this committee or those who are interested in recycling that see the value of recycling, but we are well aware of foreign entities now that are coming into the U.S. and setting up recycling facilities here because they see these minerals, and it's widely known that the U.S. is one of the largest producers of spent lithium-ion batteries.
They're mining under our very noses,
Yes, sir.
and a domestic resource.
Yes, sir.
Ridiculous. Thank